Have you ever felt like the odd one out in your family? You know, like you never quite fit the mold no matter how hard you try. Maybe you've even been called the black sheep. It's a label that carries, well, a lot of weight, doesn't it? Often points to something pretty deep and challenging. Today, we're doing a deep dive into what it really means to be that family outsider. And we're looking beyond just the pain, exploring the surprising power and transformation that can be hidden in that whole experience. Our insights today come from a really compelling source. It's a deep analysis from the YouTube channel Awakening Wisdom. And it brilliantly connects this feeling of being an outsider to the psychological depths of Carl Jung and the sharp philosophical takes of Friedrich Nietzsche. So our mission today is to try and uncover why some people become the black sheep, what the heavy psychological costs are, but also crucially, the extraordinary strengths and unique possibilities for growth that pop up when you refuse to just blend in. We want to help you understand this really complex dynamic, maybe not just for other people, but perhaps even for yourself. Because this isn't just about feeling a big different. It's about a profound journey of self-discovery, a journey that families, maybe without even realizing it, often kicks.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really, because that feeling, being an outsider, it's not just some random thing. It's often a signal.
Yeah.
A signal within the family system itself. And if you can understand the mechanics behind it, you can gain, immense clarity on your own experiences and maybe even find a new way forward.
It's such a familiar feeling for so many people, isn't it? That sense of being the one who just doesn't quite mesh, the misfit, maybe the rebel, often misunderstood, maybe criticized, sometimes even excluded. There's that specific kind of quiet pain, maybe that subtle, sometimes crushing silence when you walk into a room and just know you don't belong, or just being constantly labeled different or difficult or even broken.
And the source we're looking at makes a really critical point here. It emphasizes that the black sheep is not born black made. Families often completely unconsciously create these invisible rules about who you must be, what you must believe, how you must act. They're not written down anywhere, obviously, but every member learns them through subtle cues, the tone of voice someone uses, what isn't said, what gets praised, what gets punished.
Okay, so it's less about who you fundamentally are and more about this set of unspoken family laws that kind of shape you into that role. What sort of rules are we talking about? Any examples?
Precisely. Think about rules like don't challenge your elders, or maybe we don't talk about pain in this family, or, stick to tradition no matter what. These unwritten laws, they seem to hold the family together, right? They create a kind of common rhythm, reduce uncertainty. They define the family story. But for members whose inner life, whose true self doesn't quite align with that script, these rules can become chains, really powerful ones. And when someone steps outside those lines, they get marked. They become the black sheep.
And this idea from Carl Jung you mentioned as another layer, projection, he called it, how a family can sort of subtly hide its own stuff, its fears, its anger, its hidden flaws by basically dumping them onto one person.
Exactly. That person, the black sheep, effectively becomes the container of shame for all the family's unacknowledged, the stuff they don't want to look at. You might recognize this if you've ever felt blamed for things that just felt way bigger, or for problems that seemed to exist long before you even showed up. The family projects its own unexamined shadow, as Jung would say, onto you. And suddenly, you're carrying a heavy burden. But as our source points out, what looks like punish can actually be the start of something else. It can push that person towards authentic freedom.
Which brings us right to that core conflict. That's the one the black sheep lives with every day. That fundamental tension between wanting to belong, desperately wanting that connection, and the deep driving need to stay true to yourself, to be authentic. And this isn't just, a passing discomfort. It's described as a daily struggle, something that really shapes your personality, your behavior, even how you see yourself, your self-worth. Imagine that constant internal tug of war.
Yeah, and this is exactly where Jung's idea of individuation is so relevant. Individuation, it's that courageous journey, really. It's about aligning your outer life with your inner truth. It means integrating your unique desires, your instincts, your thoughts, even when they clash with what the group, the family expects. Think of it as, truly becoming who you are, rather than just being a reflection of the family blueprint. And families often resist this. They push back hard because it disrupts the shared image, persona they present to the world. It messes with the family map.
Wow, that's a real paradox then. You try to grow, to express your inner truth, maybe something really honest and healthy, and you're seen as disloyal or ungrateful. The source says the black sheep is often the one moving most closely toward real psychological growth. Yet that very movement gets punished like it's some kind of betrayal. Imagine the inner conflict there, choosing between your own soul, basically, and your family's brutal.
And to get why families resist authentic fears, we can bring in Friedrich Nietzsche's critique of what he called herd morality. Nietzsche pointed out that groups, families included, often create moral systems not based on objective truth, but on whatever protects the group's comfort and stability. So the family herd, as he might put it, often treats just fitting in, compliance, as a virtue. And independence, that's treated as a vice, even if that independence doesn't actually harm anyone.
Right. So, like, if a kid decides they want to be an artist instead of a doctor like everyone else in the family, they might get labeled selfish or arrogant or irresponsible. Not necessarily because being an artist is bad, but...
Exactly. It's because it challenges the family's story, their sense of unity, their established narrative. Nietzsche argued the herd resents difference because difference reveals the limits of the group's rule. It forces everyone to see there are other ways to live. So the resentment isn't really about the specific choice itself. It's more about the threat it poses to the illusion that, our way is the only way.
Okay, so let's break this down. What does all this mean for you, the listener? If you feel caught in this clash, this battle between fitting in and being true to yourself, whether you try to conform or you insist on being authentic, there are pretty significant psychological consequences. Let's start with the cost of trying to just fit in.
Right. For the person who conforms, who tries to just go along with it all, yeah, they might avoid conflict. They might get that approval they crave. But the cost, as you really highlighted, is often this inner sense of like something's missing. Denying your true self, it leads to repression. All those disowned desires, feelings, thoughts, they slip into the unconscious. And they don't just disappear. They can bubble back up as anxiety or depression, or maybe sudden bursts of anger that seem to come out of nowhere. It's like feeling, loved on the outside, but secretly hollow because that love feels conditional on you staying quiet, imitating everyone else.
Okay, but what about the other path? The person who chooses off, who insists on being themselves despite the pressure. What's the price they pay?
Well, choosing authenticity often means facing rejection, criticism, maybe deep loneliness. It's tough, but the payoff is gaining a clearer, stronger sense. Your identity becomes more solid. This is the classic position of the Black, basically accepting rejection as the price. And it's important to reframe it. The family might feel abandoned, sure, but in reality, the individual has only refused to abandon the truth of their own personal experience. That's a crucial distinction.
And the weight of these family expectations, it's especially heavy because it mixes up love and fear, doesn't it? Most people labeled black sheep don't actually hate their families. They struggle because they do love them. They want to stay connected. But that connection often seems to require wearing a mask, being a false self. So choosing authenticity feels like being disloyal, but choosing conformity feels like betraying yourself. It's this impossible double bind. And that just traps people in these cycles of guilt and shame.
Absolutely. And you see this play out in really concrete areas like career choices or lifestyle decisions. Families often put a high value on certain professions or life paths, maybe ones that reflect their story of respectability, their social standing, whatever it is.
Right. So a child choosing a totally different path, maybe something artistic or scientific or entrepreneurial, something outside the norm for that family that can feel like a threat to the whole narrative they've constructed about themselves.
Jung would probably see that as a refusal to live entirely under the family persona, a step towards personal truth. And Nietzsche might see it as an act of creating new values, stepping outside the herd's morality. The rejection that often follows, it frequently gets disguised as protection. You hear things like, oh, we only want what's best for you. But the underlying message often is really, we want you to confirm our way of living. The black sheep who insists on their different path really exposes that fragile line between genuine love and, control.
Yeah, and this tension also crops up around beliefs and values, doesn't it? Like questioning long-standing traditions or political views or maybe moral assumptions that the family holds dear. Yeah. That's often treated as being disrespectful.
Right.
But isn't questioning things a totally natural, even healthy part of growing up?
Yeah.
Developing your own mind, your own moral compass.
Nietzsche definitely thought so. He saw questioning inherited values as the path to real strength because it forces you to confront reality for yourself, not just lean on borrowed ideas. And Jung talked about how denying these inner questions creates a split psyche. Imagine living with that public mask, always smiling and agreeing, while inside your true self is wrestling with doubts and different ideas. It creates this deep fracture between the face you show the world and who you really are. So the black sheep who actually voices those questions, they might suffer socially, sure, but psychologically they remain more whole, whereas the conformist gets the approval but carries that inner division.
Wow. Considering how deep these impacts go, it really makes you wonder, how exactly do families enforce this conformity so effectively? What are the mechanisms?
Well, family systems often rely, unfortunately, on emotional manipulation. Maybe not always consciously, but the effect members might use guilt or shame or the subtle withdrawal of affection to keep people in line. You might hear things like, oh, you'll understand one day, or the classic, after all we've done for you, how could you do this? These kinds of statements frame independence, perfectly normal, trail. It reveals this hidden contract that exists in many families. Loyalty isn't measured by honest, measured by obedience. And these dynamics, they can create really long-term psychological scars because they teach you that love is conditional, that expressing your true self is somehow dangerous. Jung would say this feeds the shadow, those unconscious, disowned parts of yourself. Nietzsche might say it creates spirit, dependent on the herd.
That's a really intense picture of family dynamics.
Yeah.
So how do these patterns, these ingrained ways of relating, then affect the black sheep when they step outside the family? In friendships, romantic relationships, work.
Oh, the impact definitely extends far beyond the family home. It's like the black sheep carries this expectation of rejection with them. They often anticipate disapproval, maybe unconsciously brace for it, even in new situations with new people. So they might adjust their behavior kind of self-protectively, even when others don't intend any harm. And this can unfortunately limit intimacy, reduce trust, create distance, which then seems to confirm their identity as an outsider. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophet way. So yeah, those early family expectations really shape the lens through which the individual sees the entire social world.
The real tragedy here seems to be that family expectations often start with a good intention, right? To protect, to provide stability. But stability becomes rigidity when it stops allowing for growth, when it resists adaptation. And the black sheep role kind of emerges as a signal, doesn't it? A signal that the system has become too rigid, that it stopped adapting. It's such a paradox. The very things that lead to rejection also seem to create these unique openings for growth.
That's exactly it. Being different carries this double edge. It's crucial to see both sides. On one side, yes, there's suffering, isolation, gnawing self-doubt, real. But on the other side, you find resilience, creativity, and often a much clearer, stronger sense of identity. The outsider kind of lives on that knife edge between the two, often feeling both at the same time, because the very pain of being excluded can become the fertile ground where strength and originality take root.
Let's just quickly touch on some of those specific costs again, because they are very real. Emotional isolation, for instance. When your attempts to express yourself are met with, silence or disapproval or even ridicule, it creates this deep, aching loneliness. We're wired, right? So that feeling of being invisible or unwanted, it cuts really deep.
And that naturally leads to profound self-doubt. When your family, maybe even your wider community, consistently treats your difference like it's some kind of failure, you inevitably start to question yourself. You hear those internal whispers. Is there something fundamentally wrong with me? Am I just selfish for wanting something different? Am I defective because I can't just fit in? This constant questioning can just erode your confidence over time. Nietzsche talked about how the herd imposes its morality by labeling its own ways good and anything different bad. And when you hear that judgment over and over, the voice of the herd can actually become your own inner critic. You start condemning yourself, which can be even heavier than the external.
Yeah, absolutely. But alongside these really significant costs, there's this other reality, isn't there? Being different also seems to cultivate some unique and pretty powerful strengths.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, I think, has to be resilience.
Oh, absolutely. Learning early on that approval is often conditional, that it can be withdrawn. Well, it builds incredible endurance. The outsider often learns how to face conflict, how to handle rejection, how to navigate misunderstanding without completely falling apart. Nietzsche saw that kind of endurance as absolutely essential for greatness, because only those who can withstand resistance can forge new values, new ways of living. And Jung recognized that individuation, becoming whole, requires moving through conflict, not trying to sidestep. The black sheep is often thrown into that process earlier and more intensely than most people.
And then there's creativity. That seems linked too. When you're kind of rejected for following the established path, it often pushes you, doesn't it? Pushes you to find expression somewhere else, places where acceptance is possible. Maybe art, writing, science, innovation, starting your own. Because the black sheep can't easily follow the paths laid out by family or society. They pretty much have to invent their own way. And that process, invention, naturally breeds originality.
Nietzsche definitely argued that creativity sparks from tension, from struggle, from overcoming resistance, not from comfort and just fitting in. And Jung saw creativity as the expression of unconscious material burst. Often, it's carried by those very people who don't neatly fit the social. So the outsider's suffering doesn't just cause harm, it often fuels unique fire, this originality.
And finally, there's this interesting kind of clear-eyed moral clarity that can come from living on the margin. People who live outside the main current, they often seem to see things more clearly, don't they? The limits, the contradictions, maybe even the hypocrisies of the social rules everyone else takes for granted.
Yeah, when you've been excluded by the herd, that illusion that the herd's rules are somehow inherently fair or universally true starts to crumble. That distance gives the outsider a unique perspective. It allows them to perceive injustice or inconsistency or hypocrisy more sharply than those who are comfortably inside the circle of approval. Nietzsche called it the ability to stand beyond good and evil, not being immoral, but seeing the constructed nature of morality. Jung might describe it as recognizing the shadow of the collective. That outsider's distance becomes this powerful, almost prophetic vantage.
So when you put it all together, the paradox of the outsider's life is really that the suffering and the growth are just deeply tangled up together. The same wounds that create loneliness also cultivate strength. The same rejections that knock down your confidence also fuel your independence. The same distance that brings sadness also grants this incredible, unique perspective.
Exactly. And the challenge then for you, if you identify with this black sheep experience, is really about holding both of those realities, holding them together without letting either one completely take over. Because if you focus only on the suffering, well, that leads to despair. But if you focus only on the growth, you risk ignoring or minimizing the very real wounds that exclusion creates. The truth is, both exist side by side. They shape a life that might be more difficult in some ways, but also holds potentially much greater possibility.
It really makes you think. Growth rarely comes through comfort, does it? It seems to come through conflict, through resistance, through that really difficult struggle to stay authentic when there's so much pressure not to.
Jung showed us that psychological wholeness, becoming truly yourself, requires integrating all those rejected parts of the self. And that difficult process often begins with the pain of being labeled different. And Nietzsche showed that true great, creating something new in the world, requires forging your own value, not just living by the herd's rules. And that path demands enduring misunderstanding, even hostility. So the black sheep, although burdened with suffering, is also, in a strange way, uniquely positioned to achieve both that inner wholeness and that outer greatness, precisely because being different forces them onto this challenging path earlier and perhaps more intensely than most.
So if anything in this deep dive resonated with you today, remember this: your difference isn't necessarily a flaw. It might just be your superpower, your unique path towards wholeness, maybe even greatness. Definitely something to think about as you navigate your own journey.